Hey everyone, it's Marianne from the New York City Organization of Public Service Retirees. A friend of mine called me today and reminded me that I had done a series of videos called Labor Law 101 back in July of 2023. After reviewing the videos, I felt it was about time that we brought them back. The reason is we are right now, again, retirees still under attack by our former unions. Many of these unions in the Municipal Labor Committee in the City of New York actually do at this point in time, after all of the education and fighting that we've been doing, are supporting us. However, there are still a few that don't. And sadly, those are some of the largest unions in the City of New York, like DC37, for example, led by Henry Garrido. The Municipal Labor Committee is still stuck on this, and their leadership is Harry Nespoli from the Sanitation Men's Union, which is another one of the largest unions in the city, Gloria Middleton from CWA Local 1180, Greg Floyd from Local 237. So these are some of the people that are involved that's been troubling to us, that they still don't get the message that Medicare Advantage is not Medicare and it's not an advantage. And where everything being politicized around the country, a lot of the comments are, oh, well, we have to worry about the incoming presidential administration's going to destroy unionism and they're going to destroy Medicare. No, guys, you guys are basically destroying Medicare in the City of New York all on your own. You don't need to worry about someone else doing it for you. But sadly, what they're also doing is destroying the labor movement, because for retired unionists to have worked their entire life with the promise of health care, with the promise of Medicare when they became Medicare eligible, whether it was due to age at 65 or they became disabled on the job, that they would have Medicare in their city supplement for the rest of their life, and that there wouldn't be costs because we took years and years, decades of lower wages and reduced benefits in order to have the deferred compensation-like benefit of a pension and healthcare. So what the union's doing right now, including Henry, is by telling you that your whole life we were loyal unionists, we paid union dues, we went to the meetings, we went to the rallies, we did as they asked, with the promise that what we had worked hard for with our union was going to be there in our retirement. And sadly, those unions in the Municipal Labor Committee chose to liquidate retiree health benefits for raises. We've seen this in the Municipal Labor Committee, and we've also seen this in Transport Workers Union Local 100 under Richard Davis. So not only is this happening in New York, this is happening around the country. Our organization has actually helped other retirees in other states fight the very same thing. We kind of like have a playbook at this point on how to fight back. But going back to the purpose for tonight, I want to show you one of my first videos from July of 2023, because Henry Garrido from District Council 37 invited the City Council to a private meeting at DC37 headquarters on Monday, December 16th. And they didn't invite us. And the topic of conversation was us and our Intro 1096 that we drafted with council to support a current retiree. And why is that important? Because this bill doesn't impact an active worker. It doesn't violate collective bargaining because retirees, as we've been telling you for decades, do not collectively bargain. We're not in unions. We don't have wages, hours, and work conditions. This bill is for a current retiree. It would be tantamount Henry's getting involved in him trying to negotiate for retirees in Nebraska. They're not in their union. They're in Nebraska. I'm basically Nebraska at this point. I am not in DC37 any longer. I owe nothing to DC37. I owe nothing to Henry Garrido. And yet, he's trying to get involved in legislation that doesn't impact him or his members. He had a duty, a solemn duty, as every union in the city did, to protect their retired unionists. And when they didn't do that, our organization had a reason to exist, to protect the benefits that we earned and to preserve our traditional Medicare. So I want you to see this first video, and there's 4 of them. And over the next couple of days, I'll just do the same thing and drop in live and show you the next 3 series. If you want, you can go ahead and watch them on their own. They're still up on YouTube. And the link in the video, which I will put in one of the comments or in the subject of this one, it is Labor Law 101. And if you go to our channel at NYC Retirees on YouTube, you will look up labor law, and there's 4 videos. And every video has a link to the next video in case you miss it. So stay tuned. I want you to watch this. Hey everyone, it's Marianne from the New York City Organization of Public Service Retirees. I want to do a series of videos on labor law because there's a lot of misinformation about the bill that Councilman Barron, Intro 1099, has introduced is illegal, as you've all heard from City Council Speaker and several City Council persons repeating the same big lie. And then you also hear Alan Klinger, the MLC, DC37, the UFT, say that they represent retirees, which they don't. And I'm going to start this small. We're going to do this in little pieces so that you don't get lost. I'm going to try to keep these short, under 4 or 5 minutes. So here we go. I want to share with you a case from 1977 called Chemical Workers versus Pittsburgh Glass. It's decided in 1971. In this case, this case was argued in 71, but it went through a series of appeals. When it was originally argued, it was about the time that Medicare became available in 1966, 65, 66. And what happened was Pittsburgh Glass was offering health care to the workers. And when Medicare became available, they said, well, this kind of makes our plan obsolete, so we're just going to end it. And the chemical workers were like, no, you can't do that. So they tried to get them to change their mind, and they wouldn't do it. And so they filed a lawsuit against Pittsburgh Glass. They were saying that the union was saying they represent retirees. So the National Labor Relations Board got involved. I want to show you a little bit of the argument. It says a labor organization that was the exclusive bargaining agent for employees working on hourly pay rates at one of the respondent company's facilities had negotiated with the company an employee health insurance plan in which retired employees participated. Upon enactment of Medicare, the union sought midterm bargaining to renegotiate the insurance benefits for retired employees. The company maintained that Medicare made the insurance program useless and the retirees' benefits were not a mandatory subject of collective bargaining, stated that it would offer each retiree a stated monthly amount towards supplemental coverage. When, despite the union's objections, the company made the offer, the union filed an unfair labor practice with the National Labor Relations Board. The National Labor Relations Board concluded that the company was guilty of an unfair labor practice in violation of Section 8A5 and 1 of the National Labor Relations Act and issued a cease and desist order. The NLRB held that the benefits of already retired employees were a mandatory subject of bargaining as terms and conditions of employment of the retirees themselves and alternately the active bargaining unit employees. It also held that the company's establishment of a fixed additional option in and of itself changed the negotiated plan of benefits, contrary to Section 8D and 8A5 of the Act. The Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit disagreed with the NLRB and refused to enforce the cease and desist order. What they held was that retiree benefits are not within the meaning of 8A5, 8D of the NLRA, a mandatory subject of bargaining on the terms and conditions of employment of retirees. The collective bargaining obligations extends only to the terms and conditions of the employment of employers' employees, and the term employee has its own ordinary meaning, someone who works for another for hire, which excludes retirees. We've been saying the same thing because those provisions are also under the New York City collective bargaining law and the Taylor law, which are a little bit different than the NLRA, but they are still in line, and this case still carries. Collective bargaining is an obligation is limited to the terms and conditions of employment of the employees in the bargaining unit, appropriate for the purpose of collective bargaining. Retirees are not members of the unit represented by the union because they are no longer working, nor could they be members since they lack substantial community interest with the active employees in the unit. We keep saying this because the needs of a retiree are different than those of an employee. This is why you don't typically have supervisors and ordinary employees in the same bargaining unit. Their needs are different. So even in industry practice of bargaining over retirees' rights exists, which is disputed, that cannot change the law and make into a bargaining unit employees those who are not. Retirees' benefits are not a mandatory subject of bargaining as terms and conditions of employment of the active employees remaining in the bargaining unit, although their future retirement plans are. Retirees' benefit do not vitally affect the terms and conditions of employment of current employees. The benefits that active workers may reap, including retired employees under the same health insurance contract as themselves, are speculative and insubstantial at best. The relationship with the NLRB asserted exists between bargaining in behalf of retirees and negotiating of active employees' retirement benefits is equally too speculative a foundation on which to base an obligation to bargain. So in this case, they found that the active workers cannot, that union cannot represent a retired person. So there's a few pieces to this case that I do want to go to, and I want you to be able to hear it for yourself. And then I'm going to break this apart in small pieces just so that it's not too long. And let's see. I think my video got stuck. Hold on. And that was the good part too. It'll be right at the video. Let me see if I can get that back up. Don't go anywhere. Let's see. Okay. Now you could actually hear this case, but for this, I do want to jump to
employees for purposes of their retirement benefits.
Well, Mr. Cohn, were the benefits that the employer had been paying before the change or before the offer, were they required by a collective bargaining contract? Were they part of the terms of a collective bargaining contract?
They were required by an agreement. What the company did was they negotiated a collective bargaining agreement, and then they, at the same time, executed a side agreement covering
with the union.
With the union.
So that anyway, it's a contractual matter.
That is correct.
Now, what if the employer had just instead of changing the payments, had just stopped them? I suppose the individual retired employees would have had a cause of action against him.
That is correct.
Wouldn't the union too?
Or for breach of the collective bargaining agreement, perhaps probably under 301.
Is there some doubt
and
about
301
it?
is breach of contract.
I do not think that there is any
You
doubt
don't
about
breach of the collective bargaining agreement, breach of the side agreement.
breach of the
301
side.
breaches of any agreement.
That is correct.
Now, does your position also include the proposition that the union could negotiate a modification of the side agreement on the retirement benefits, reducing them, and bind the retired employees? Here's an agreement that's been made. The promise is to pay X, and there are employees who retire, the union and the employer get together and they all agree that the fund isn't going to stand it or something, or that it's desirable to lower retirement benefits generally, and they lower them. Is the union the representative of those retired employees for that purpose?
I think that the logic of my argument would.
And Mr. Comey is the attorney for the NLRB.
However.
And how does that work out when the employee, when that retired employee has absolutely no voice?
Well, I think you then get into problems of breach of the duty of fair representation.
Yep.
The question as to whether or not if the thing is vested, any such agreement is going to be enforceable. However, with the employer free to act unilaterally, you've got the same problem. The only question is whether you reach it as a result of the employer's unilateral action or as a result of collective bargaining.
And that's what we've always said, because we always taught you that the unions should never have pushed retirees to say that retirees are not protected by the unions, because basically then what we're saying is, well, then I guess the city could just screw you all on your own without the protection of the union. This is why union leaderships in the past have always urged the union leaders taking their places to never touch a retiree benefit ever, and to never allow it to be negotiated down. This is why bad things happen. It was fine to modify, slightly tweak to improve, but once you start going down that rabbit hole of diminishing a benefit, you've lost. And to have to insist that why are you capitulating to mutually agree with the city to diminish a healthcare benefit for a retiree, you'll start to hear some of those arguments in the later clips, but let me continue.
I think that
but there are always contractual remedies against them. If he lowers if he doesn't live up to his agreement, the retired employees can have an action against him.
Well, I think that they would.
And your objection is that he's raising the benefit.
Well, they could also have an action against the union for breach of the duty of fair representation. However, we don't have anything like that in this case, Your Honor.
Going back to the hypothetical that Mr. Justice White suggested to you about the union exercising this power to negotiate a reduction in benefits previously agreed upon. Seems to me I recall some Court of Appeals cases that have referred to this in terms of a possible breach of the fiduciary duty of the union toward its members.
Yes, Your Honor. I think that a union would bring itself afoul of that line of decision.
Would the board have jurisdiction of that, or would that be a suit under 301, or where would it be?
And that was one of the things we were also saying is we should never have been put into a position as a retired person to say that the union was not protecting us and our benefits, because what are we saying? Then if the union doesn't represent a retired person, which they don't by law, but that's not something you wanted to say out loud, then you're basically saying that the management can just screw you all by themselves. And what the active workers should have been looking at, and the active union leadership should have been looking at, is I should be protecting my future from diminishment. And especially from people that retired from before you that don't make a lot of money, as most retirees that retired before you don't. 2/3 of DC37 retirees make under $26,000 pensions. 1/3 of them make under 12. I have a nurse that retired in 1987 from HHC. Her pension is $7,100 a year. I have a firefighter who retired in 1979 after about 30 years of service, and his pension is $26,000 a year. This wasn't the people that you should have been messing with their benefits. We earned and paid for that, but more to come. I'm going to end this here. I want you to think about what you heard, and then I'm going to do another few shorts to start showing you that unions do not collectively bargain for retired workers. They can collectively bargain for active workers in their units and those active workers' future retirement benefits. And I also want to prove to you that the speaker is misleading you all by saying that the legislation is illegal for Intro 1099, because it is not. She's saying that it would inhibit collective bargaining, and it would not. Thank you. So this video was literally filmed by me in July of 2023. And at the time, we were pushing Intro 1099, which was introduced by Councilman Charles Barron and Council Member Lynn Shulman. Today, we have a new bill because that bill died and it wasn't passed. And it was any council member that was supporting us was basically threatened by the city council speaker, Adrian Adams, and then city council member Carmen De La Rosa, who chairs Civil Service and Labor. The bill went to her committee and she absolutely refused to call the bill to a hearing. She wouldn't have a meeting. And when we asked her why, there's an article about this from Joe Maniscalco in Work Bites, and I think one in the Daily News, how Carmen De La Rosa literally said to the reporter, "The speaker is my speaker, and I will not cross the speaker." And we reminded her of the city council rules that the speaker is not to interfere with committee meetings. She didn't seem to care, and she never called the bill for a meeting. And again, Intro 1096, introduced this time by council members Chris Marte and Bob Holden, again got assigned to Carmen De La Rosa, Civil Service and Labor. So to understand some of the arguments that the union is using is that it interferes with collective bargaining. What they're really not saying, and let me define what that means. Of course, you saw the video that I did with Alan Klinger, the lawyer for the Municipal Labor Committee, who I believe is conflicted because he also represents DC37, the UFT, 237, sanitation, 1180. He said that the bill by itself doesn't interfere with collective bargaining because there's a line in 1099. It was two sentences for those that don't remember. The first line says that the city had to provide a Medigap supplemental plan. The second line said that nothing in this bill shall impair the unions from collectively bargaining. And so in the video, which was a short, you can go up to our YouTube channel, and I posted another video the other day on it. He says it in the bill in itself doesn't impair collective bargaining, but what it would do is that in their interpretation, if the city had to pay for retirees, it would be less that it would spend on active workers. And not one of the 100 unionists in the room, the gentleman that was asking the question, because he understood what was being said, but the other 100-something behind him didn't rebuke that they were clawing back a benefit, liquidating benefits from their retired union members to finance their current contracts and pay for their current health care. They had no problem with stealing from a retired worker. None. And that's what got us here. So when people start saying that all these other forces are going to destroy the labor movement, no. These ill-advised union leaders are destroying the union movement that we built, and that has got to stop. This is where we have to call this out, or whatever happens in the country, we won't have to worry about, because there won't be a valid, viable union in the city of New York if this is allowed to continue. What the union is literally saying, what Henry Garrido is fighting for, is he wants access to a retired worker's health care so that he could liquidate it to finance his next contract. And that has to stop. And as I said a year and a half ago in that video, retired workers always knew that they were not in unions and that if management wanted to screw them, they could. You always were at the mercy of the union, knowing that that was the deal, and that because you never wanted to say out loud that unions didn't represent you. In this case, we had no choice, because if we didn't have to worry about management screwing retirees. We were being screwed by our own former unions. So we were getting screwed either way. And at this point, we had to make it known. Unions had to understand. You either had to learn that your duty, a solemn duty to your retired unionists, was to protect them. Otherwise, we would be screwed by management unilaterally. And unfortunately, these few ended up putting all the unions in that same position because they didn't have a contract. They were looking for money to fund their raises, which was what the deal was under Michael Bloomberg, the gift who keeps on giving. That unions couldn't get a raise unless they funded it, which meant they had to give something back. So as I say in all these other videos that you see when we talk about healthcare, every time the active workers start complaining about copays and narrow networks and who's not in the preferred list of hospitals, that's not because the insurance company is willy-nilly just agreeing to do that. This umbrella group of the Municipal Labor Committee is financing contracts by leveraging the entire city healthcare program, liquidating your healthcare to fund their raises. And who benefits the most? The two largest unions, DC37 and the UFT. That copay didn't come from Emblem. That copay came because the Municipal Labor Committee agreed to do it. In the paperwork that we have, with the new copays that are coming on Medicare eligible retirees that we've been fighting for the last couple of years, that wasn't Emblem initiating that. That was literally put a value at like $46 or $48 million a year that the unions could use if they charged the elderly and the disabled for using their health care. Knowing that they're older and sicker, 9/11 responders, the disabled, and a large elderly population, if they charged them every time they went to the doctor, it could yield them $50 million for their raises and health benefits. For active workers, that make some cases over six figures. Where us, we don't make a lot of money because we've been retired for a very long time. So this is where we have to keep pointing them back to the right way. Because if we don't right our unions, there won't be a union. So this is also where the city council has to start paying attention. Because the union leadership are making grave mistakes. They should never have done this, and they should never have put us in this situation. And this is why we went to the council, because it was the council that legislated our healthcare with the mayor in 1967. And yes, Jazz Snare, copays begin in January because we haven't been able to argue that case in court yet. It has not been given a date. But that case has not been argued. But this was also another way of saying that this healthcare program that the city has, they literally changed the contract with Emblem Health to allow for copays, which is why we got the injunction the first time. There was nothing in the contract that allowed them to do that. But then the MLC, the largest unions in the city, came back to the city and said, yes, go ahead and charge those people a $15 copays. We need that $50 million. And that's what they did. Now, court law has affirmed that things have to be protected. Your benefits have to be protected. And there's fine lines between what they identify as copay and premium. And this is one way that they're getting around the court's decision is by passing off premium as a copay. So stay tuned, everyone. I will come back probably tomorrow around the same time, 6:30, and I'll do segment 2 so that you can keep seeing this. And it's important that you keep calling your city council members and telling them that they need to look at this case. They don't need to listen to me. They need to watch this case, Pittsburgh Plate Glass from 1977. Because this case says exactly what we've been saying. And here, you're not only listening to one of the most famous courts in the country, you're also listening to the National Labor Relations Board and a union leader, a union lawyer, say unions don't represent retirees. And they would never, if the active workers ever saw that their union was going to diminish a healthcare benefit, they would never stand for it. Yet 50 years later, this is exactly where we are. So anyway, have a great night, everyone. Thanks for watching. It's been great trying to help educate everybody. Pass this message on. It's super, super important that everyone, the active workers, have to listen to this message. I'm going to put a quick little ticker back here at the bottom. If you are a New York City retiree or want to support a New York City retiree, our website is www.nycretirees.org. If you are a transit retiree, you are a completely different case because you have different lawyers and you are a quasi-state employee, not a city employee. Their website to donate to their litigation is www.twu100r.org. Keep supporting these organizations because it's the only way that they're able to fight back to protect their traditional Medicare benefits. And spread the word to active workers. If there's elections, they need to vote. They need to hold their union leaders accountable, and they need to pay attention because this is their future. Have a great night, everyone, and thank you.